Imagine this, you're sitting across from someone you really like. You feel the energy, the connection, the excitement building, but suddenly they pull back. Maybe they stop texting as often. Maybe they seem less engaged, a little more distant. And what do most people do in this moment? They panic, they chase, they overcompensate, they start sending longer messages, checking their phone obsessively, thinking, maybe if I just try harder, they'll see how much I care. But let's pause for a second. Why is the instinct to beg, to chase, to overextend ourselves so strong? The answer lies in the way we define our own value. If you believe at your core that you are enough, that you bring something unique to the table, and that you don't need to prove your worth to be loved or appreciated, then you will never feel the urge to beg for attention. But if there's even a small part of you that feels like you're not quite enough, like you need to convince someone to like you, then desperation becomes your default mode. And here's the harsh truth. Desperation is never attractive. It doesn't matter how good looking you are, how successful you are, or how much you have to offer. When you give off an energy of please choose me, it repels people. Not because they're cruel or heartless, but because deep down we are wired to value what is valuable. And value is never desperate. Think about the last time you really wanted something, an exclusive opportunity, a rare item, a business deal with someone you admired. What made it so appealing? The fact that not everyone could have it. The fact that it was something you had to earn. Now apply this same principle to yourself. When you act as if someone else is the prize and you're just lucky to be considered, you strip yourself of your own power. You send the message that your worth is dependent on whether or not they choose you. But when you show up as someone who knows their value, who isn't looking for scraps of attention, but instead expects mutual investment, you become the prize. And this isn't about arrogance, it's about understanding a fundamental truth. You don't need to be chosen to be valuable. You don't need someone to validate your worth. You already have it. And when you operate from that mindset, the whole game changes. Now let's talk about the psychology behind this. The human brain is wired to seek challenge. We respect what isn't easily obtained. We value what requires effort. This is why, paradoxically, the more you chase, the less you are appreciated. The more you try to force someone's attention, the less they feel the need to give it to you. It's not because they don't care, it's because you've made yourself too easy. It's the law of supply and demand. When something is rare, it's valued. When something is overly available, it's taken for granted. This is not about playing games. It's about positioning yourself in a way that aligns with human nature. But let's go deeper. This isn't just about attraction. It's about how you treat yourself when no one is watching. If you find yourself constantly needing external reassurance through social media, through romantic validation, through the attention of others, it's time to ask yourself a hard question. Do I actually believe I am enough? Because if you don't, no amount of chasing will ever fill that void. You'll always need more attention, more texts, more proof that you matter. But here's the catch. No one can give that to you, not permanently. You have to build it from the inside. You have to cultivate a life that is already full so that when someone enters it, they are an addition, not the foundation. This is where real power comes from. When you stop chasing, not because you're trying to manipulate someone into wanting you, but because you genuinely understand that you don't need to, everything shifts. You become magnetic. You become the person who walks into a room and doesn't need to seek approval because they carry their own. You stop asking, will they like me? And instead ask, do I even like them? And that's the ultimate shift. When you no longer feel the urge to beg for love, for attention, for validation, because you already know you are enough. You attract people who see your worth without you having to prove it. So the next time you feel the urge to chase, to over-explain, to prove yourself, stop. Ask yourself, am I acting from confidence or from fear, because one will make you irresistible, the other will make you invisible. Your value is not determined by who chooses you, it's determined by how you choose yourself. And when you fully embrace that, the right people will come to you without begging, without chasing, without waiting, just naturally, just effortlessly, just as it should be. Let's talk about attraction, not in the way most people think about it, but in the way it actually works. Because if you've ever felt like you're constantly the one putting in the effort, the one initiating, the one doing all the heavy lifting in your relationships, romantic or otherwise, then there's something important you need to understand. Chasing doesn't create attraction, it kills it. When you chase someone, whether it's through texts, calls, plans, or even just the way you keep them in your thoughts, you put yourself in the position of the pursuer. And here's the problem with that. People don't value what chases them. They value what they feel drawn to. Think about the moments in life when you've wanted something the most. Was it because it was readily available, or was it because there was something about it, something mysterious, challenging, or rare that made it feel special? Attraction at its core isn't about availability, it's about presence. It's about the energy you bring into a room, the way you carry yourself, the way you make someone want to come closer to you without you having to pull them in. But let's go deeper. Why do we chase in the first place? Most of the time, it comes from a place of fear. Fear that if we don't make the move, nothing will happen. Fear that if we don't remind them of our existence, they'll forget about us. Fear that if we just sit back and live our lives, we'll be left alone. But here's what's fascinating. This fear creates exactly what we're trying to avoid. The more you chase, the less valuable you seem. The more you push, the more people pull away. Not because they're playing games, but because it's human nature to resist what feels forced. We respect what is confident enough to stand on its own. You've probably seen this dynamic play out 100 times. The friend who's always available gets taken for granted. The person who texts back instantly, always makes plans and never creates any space, gets overlooked. Meanwhile, the person who isn't in a rush, who isn't desperate for attention, who seems completely content whether or not they're being pursued, that's the one people find intriguing. This is because attraction isn't about effort. It's about magnetism. Now, let's make something clear. This isn't about playing games. It's not about manipulating people into wanting you by purposely ignoring them or acting aloof. It's about shifting your entire mindset. Instead of thinking, how do I get them to like me? Start thinking, how do I become the kind of person they naturally want to be around? Because the truth is, attraction isn't something you create in another person. It's something you cultivate within yourself. It's an energy. And that energy comes from how you feel about yourself, how fulfilled you are in your own life, how genuinely happy you are, with or without them. There's a concept in psychology called the paradox of choice. When we feel we have too many options, we become overwhelmed and struggle to make a decision. But what's even more interesting is that we are more drawn to the options that seem just slightly out of reach because they create a sense of urgency. Now apply this to attraction. If you make yourself too available, if you're always the one reaching out, always the one initiating, then you remove any sense of mystery. There's no urgency, no intrigue, no feeling that you are someone worth pursuing because you're already doing all the work. There is something deeply ironic about attraction. The more we cling, the more we push people away. The more we try to lock something down, the more elusive it becomes. And yet we still hold on to this idea that if we just try harder, if we just show more love, send more texts, prove how much we care, then maybe, just maybe, we'll get what we want. But let's take a step back for a second. Have you ever noticed how the things we chase seem to slip through our fingers while the things we're relaxed about tend to flow effortlessly into our lives? That's not a coincidence. It's a reflection of one of the most powerful forces in human psychology, detachment. Now, let's be clear. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It doesn't mean shutting down emotionally or pretending you don't care. In fact, true detachment is the opposite. It's about caring deeply, but without the fear of loss. It's about investing in something without needing it to go a certain way. And that right there is the shift most people struggle to make. Because neediness, the emotional weight of wanting something too much, is what destroys attraction. It suffocates the very thing you're trying to nurture. Think about the relationships in your life. Have you ever been around someone who just needed you too much? Someone who was constantly checking in, constantly seeking reassurance, constantly afraid that if they didn't keep reminding you of their presence, they'd be forgotten. How did that make you feel? Probably exhausted, maybe even a little trapped. Now, contrast that with someone who values you but doesn't need you. Someone who enjoys your presence but doesn't cling. That person is refreshing. That person makes you want to lean in, not pull away. Why? Because we are drawn to what feels free. When someone is detached, they give off an energy of confidence. They aren't trying to force a connection. They aren't looking for external validation. They aren't making someone else the center of their universe. Instead, they are fully present in their own lives. And that is incredibly attractive. But let's go deeper. Why is detachment so hard? The answer is simple. Fear. Fear that if we let go, we'll lose. Fear that if we stop trying so hard, the other person will forget about us. Fear that if we don't control the situation, it will slip away. And yet control is an illusion. We don't control how people feel. We don't control how they show up. We don't control whether they stay or leave. The only thing we ever truly control is ourselves, our mindset, our energy, our actions. This is where detachment becomes a superpower. Because when you release the need to control, when you stop trying to force things, when you trust that what is meant for you will naturally flow into your life, you become unstoppable. Suddenly, you're not sitting by your phone, anxiously waiting for a text. You're not overanalyzing someone's every word, trying to decode whether they're still interested. You're not bending over backward to prove your worth. Instead, you're moving forward. You're focusing on your purpose, your passions, your happiness. And when you do that, people feel the shift. They sense that you're not desperate for their attention, that you're not waiting on them to make your life complete. And that's precisely why they become more intrigued. Because nothing is more powerful than someone who is completely at peace with or without you. But here's the paradox. When you master detachment, you don't just attract more. You also become better at letting go of what doesn't serve you. Because when you're detached, you no longer tolerate lukewarm energy. You no longer waste time on people who are unsure about you. You no longer chase something that isn't choosing you in return. Instead, you move with a quiet confidence. A confidence that says, I want you, but I don't need you. A confidence that makes people realize that being with you is a privilege, not a necessity. And that's the real secret. The moment you become willing to walk away from anything that isn't meeting your standards, you gain a level of power that few people ever experience. So if you find yourself in a place of chasing, clinging, or over-investing in someone who isn't matching your energy, stop, breathe, step back. Ask yourself, am I acting from confidence or from fear? Because detachment isn't about giving up. It's about rising above. It's about choosing yourself first. And when you do, the right people won't need to be chased. Think about the last time you really wanted something. Not just casually, but desperately. Maybe it was a job, a relationship, an opportunity that felt like the one. And in that moment, your entire world shrank down to the possibility of getting it. You fixated on it. You strategized around it. You agonized over what would happen if you lost it. Now, let me ask you, how did that make you feel? Chances are it made you anxious, stressed, maybe even powerless. That's because when we believe there's only one chance, one person, one path to success, we enter what's called a scarcity mindset. Sadly, convinces you that if you don't fight tooth and nail for what you want, it will slip through your fingers and there will be nothing left. It makes you overextend, overthink, and overcommit, all in the name of securing something that in reality was never meant to be forced. And here's where it gets dangerous. When you operate from scarcity, you lower your standards. You tolerate less than you deserve. You cling to situations that don't serve you because the fear of losing outweighs the confidence of knowing you'll find better. That's why people beg. That's why they chase. That's why they wait around for someone who's only giving them breadcrumbs. Not because they truly believe this is the best they can do, but because they've convinced themselves there isn't more out there. But what if you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that more was always coming? That's what an abundance mindset is. It's the belief that life is filled with opportunities, that there isn't just one person who could love you, one chance to succeed, one defining moment that makes or breaks your future. It's understanding that your world doesn't collapse when something doesn't go your way. It expands. And this isn't just motivational talk, it's psychology. Studies show that when people believe they have limited options, they become worse at making decisions. They become more emotionally reactive. They operate from fear rather than confidence. But when they believe they have options, their decision making improves, their stress decreases. They make better choices for themselves. So let's apply this to attraction. When you approach relationships with a scarcity mindset, you act like each person is your last chance at love. You become overly invested before they've even proven they're worthy of your time. You ignore red flags because you fear you won't find better. You chase, you beg, you settle, all because your mind has tricked you into believing there's nothing else out there. But when you embrace abundance, everything shifts. You stop forcing what isn't meant for you. You stop romanticizing people who aren't putting in effort. You stop giving your energy to situations that don't align with your worth. You realize that if someone doesn't choose you, someone else will. And this isn't about arrogance. It's about faith, not in a spiritual sense, but in a psychological one. It's about trusting that as long as you keep showing up as your best self, as long as you keep putting yourself in environments that align with your values, as long as you keep growing, then of course you're going to attract the right people and opportunities. It's inevitable. But here's the challenge. Embracing abundance requires patience. It requires being okay with temporary discomfort. It means walking away from something mediocre without immediately having something better lined up. And that's scary. Most people don't want to sit in that uncertainty. They'd rather cling to what's in front of them, even if it's unfulfilling, than risk not knowing what's next. But here's the truth. If you're too busy holding on to the wrong things, you won't have open hands when the right things arrive. So, how do you make this shift? It starts with your daily habits. Do you put yourself in environments where you're exposed to new people and opportunities? Do you take care of your body and mind so that you feel attractive and confident rather than relying on external validation? Do you set standards for what you accept and actually stick to them? Because if you aren't living a life that reflects abundance, you can't expect to attract it. And here's the beautiful irony. When you genuinely believe there's more out there, people sense it. They see it in the way you carry yourself. They feel it in the way you communicate. You stop being the person who's hoping to be chosen and start being the person who's doing the choosing. That's what makes you magnetic. That's what makes people sit up and take notice. Not because you're trying to convince them of your worth, but because you genuinely know it. So the next time you feel that desperate pull, that fear that if you let go, you'll lose everything, pause. Ask yourself, am I acting from abundance or scarcity? Because the moment you start living as if more is always coming, it will. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt drawn to someone? Not because they were the loudest or the most physically attractive, but because there was something about their energy that made you pay attention. They weren't chasing anyone's approval, they weren't trying too hard, and yet people naturally gravitated toward them. That's what it means to have high value presence. It's not about being the most charismatic person in the room. It's about carrying yourself in a way that signals, I belong here. I am enough, exactly as I am. And here's the thing, people can feel it. The way you move, the way you speak, the way you interact with the world, it all communicates something. If you walk into a space, shrinking yourself, second guessing whether you're wanted, seeking validation before you even open your mouth, people pick up on that. And without realizing it, they respond accordingly. But when you enter with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value, when you speak deliberately, take up space, and make eye contact without hesitation, you shift the entire dynamic. Suddenly, you're not chasing connection, you're commanding it. And this isn't about arrogance. It's about certainty. Certainty in yourself, certainty in what you bring to the table, certainty that you don't need to beg, chase, or convince anyone to see your worth, because the right people will recognize it effortlessly. But let's go deeper. What does it actually mean to embody high-value presence? It's more than just body language. It's a mindset. It's the belief that you are already enough without needing external validation to prove it. And that belief shapes everything, how you speak, how you respond, even how you sit in silence. Most people struggle with this because they walk into interactions trying to be liked. They think, what can I say to make them interested? How do I impress them? What if they don't think I'm enough? And that's where they lose, because the moment you seek validation, you lower your value. The moment you try to prove yourself, you imply that there's something missing. But here's what's fascinating. When you stop trying so hard, when you stop grasping for approval, when you show up fully engaged in your experience rather than worrying about someone else's perception of you, that's when people lean in. Because confidence isn't about always knowing what to say. It's about being comfortable even when you don't. Think about the most magnetic people you've ever met. Were they the ones filling every silence with nervous chatter? Or were they the ones who could sit back, listen, and let the conversation unfold naturally? There is power in stillness, power in presence, power in being completely at ease in your own skin. And the best part? You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to have it. You just have to stop seeking external validation and start embodying the truth that you are already valuable. Now, let's make this practical. If you want to cultivate high value presence, stop focusing on what others think of you and start focusing on how you feel in your own body. Do you carry yourself with certainty? Do you speak with clarity and intention? Do you listen actively instead of just waiting for your turn to talk? And most importantly, do you believe, truly believe that you deserve to be in any room you walk into? Because the moment you do, something shifts. People start noticing you differently. They start responding to you differently. Not because you've changed what you say, but because you've changed how you see yourself. That's the secret. The people who move through life effortlessly, attracting connection, opportunity, and respect, they aren't trying to be chosen. They are simply choosing themselves over and over again and allowing the right people to come to them. So the next time you walk into a room, ask yourself, am I chasing approval or am I embodying presence? Because when you stand firmly in your own value, the world will always take notice. Most people don't struggle because they don't know what they want. They struggle because they're too afraid to let go of what's not working. We hold on far longer than we should to people, situations, and patterns that drain us. We tell ourselves, maybe if I try harder, maybe if I just give it a little more time, maybe if I change myself, it will finally work. And in that space, we wait. We hold out for potential instead of reality. We convince ourselves that attachment equals love, that effort equals progress, that if we just stick with it, we'll be rewarded. But that's not how it works. The truth is, the people who don't waste their lives in unfulfilling situations aren't the ones who fight the hardest to keep things alive. They're the ones who are brave enough to walk away when something isn't right. And that's terrifying. The idea that strength isn't in holding on, but in letting go, because letting go feels like failure. It feels like giving up. It feels like losing control. But here's what no one tells you. Holding on to the wrong things is the failure. Every second you spend clinging to something that isn't choosing you back is a second you could be investing in something better. Every ounce of energy you pour into proving your worth to someone who doesn't see it is energy that could be building the life you actually deserve. And deep down, you know this. You know when a relationship is one-sided. You know when someone is stringing you along. You know when you've outgrown a situation but are staying out of comfort. So why don't we leave? Because we're addicted to the idea of closure. We want a clean ending. We want certainty. We want someone to tell us, yes, you were right to walk away. Yes, you made the right choice. But life doesn't always give us that. Sometimes you don't get closure. Sometimes you don't get a perfect explanation. Sometimes the only clarity you'll ever get is the moment you decide to stop waiting for something that isn't showing up for you. And that's the power of letting go. It's not just about removing something from your life. It's about reclaiming the space it was taking up. It's about trusting that every ending is just making room for something better. Because the moment you let go of what's not meant for you, you create space for what is. But here's where most people go wrong. They say they're letting go, but they're really just waiting for something better to show up first. They keep one foot in the door, just in case. They pretend to move on, but secretly hope the past comes chasing after them. And that's not real letting go. That's just bargaining with the universe. Real letting go is when you fully release your grip without knowing what's next. It's when you trust that even if nothing replaces what you've lost immediately, you are still better off without it. And that takes courage, because it means being alone for a while. It means facing uncertainty. It means resisting the urge to run back to something familiar just because it's there. But once you do it, once you fully let go, something incredible happens. You stop wasting energy on things that aren't yours. You stop looking for signs where there are none. You stop living in the past and start moving forward. And the best part, the moment you truly let go, the right things start finding you. Not because you chased them, not because you forced them, but because you finally made room for them to arrive. So if you've been holding on to something that isn't holding on to you, whether it's a person, a hope, or an illusion, it's time. Let it go. Not because you don't care, not because it doesn't matter, but because you do.